Okay.
And then probably Steve, you've seen a lot of this stuff. Did you see? And what I'm going to do today, I was just focusing on what young people are doing with the content and what the overall, give you a little tour through the website, because the website can be daunting to just come in there because there's 180 different pages, and in those 180 pages there's 3,000 links, which can you know, it's almost like Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond, getting through a lot of the sections. But Stephen, I don't think have you seen the website, Stephen?
Oh, yeah, I've seen it. Well,
No, Stephen Brown.
Oh,
Have you seen it?
No, he's on mute.
Sorry, I muted myself because there was some noise my printer was making. Is it on YouTube?
No, have you seen the website yet?
I guess not. Well,
Oh,
last
okay.
time I looked for something, it was YouTube that came up.
Yeah, the YouTube channel, that's been up, that was developed by one of our interns back in 2010. We just wanted to see what the workflow was. It was like 500 clips from the first 25 interviews that Eric did. And it was a test model to see how the YouTube platform handled the videos, which we're looking more for at TED.com whenever we find funding for major funding to create platforms is more of our idea, because for those that you aren't familiar with It's Our Story, since 2005, I've been traveling around to about 260 locations throughout West America and have captured over 1,620 90-minute video histories. And Steve, we first met in Louisville at the beginning of it in August during Katrina was blowing in. And we weren't supposed to be in Louisville. We were in Atlanta, and the whole idea was go down the Appalachian Trails, go Friends of Ed Roberts, and then go over to Mississippi and go up the Mississippi and touch in with Friends of Ed Roberts. That was the whole starting of it. And so Steve was in there like interview number 21 with his buddy from the East Coast, Chris Palamas. But Katrina blew our plans apart because we're in Atlanta, and I'm looking at my 17-year-old kid who had muscular dystrophy and who's doing a History Day project, because originally it was a History Day project. And I looked at him going, well, we're not going to go to New Orleans. And so we cut up, Chris told us about this little conference in Louisville that both of them were at. So we pulled in there. We tried to get to Cassie. We also had Cass Irwin.
Right. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. And Mary couldn't make it, but we went back to Louisville. But anyway, so Steve's been a pioneer, one of the first ones that said, yes, come on in, we'll talk shop. And we ended up that tour going from Louisville to St. Louis, where we stopped in with Max Starkloff and his posse. And then shot up to Chicago and checked in with Marka Brista and her posse. And then ended up the tour with Billy Golfus when Billy broke his head. And then Billy was a funny story because we get there around 6 o'clock at night. Well, Billy had to interview us for 3 hours to see if he would consent to having us interview him. And Billy was used to call Ed every day. So it was like, and he made it, if you haven't seen When Billy Broke His Head, it's a fabulous and pioneering film, which unfortunately, Billy lost all rights to. His professor from University of Minnesota sandbagged him. So he doesn't even get royalties or anything from that film. And it was a sad part of a great story. And so that's what, and speaking of rights, that's why we do this Nothing About Us Without Us. I don't have people sign releasing their rights. It's kind of like when you're in the disability rights movement, everybody wants you to sign away your rights. And we don't do that, and we only we contact them when their stuff appears in a finished form, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then have them sign a release and that. But I'd like to start off with I don't know. Let's just start off with some work that well, let's start off with the first piece of film, the History Day project. And this is what I do. The whole idea is to get local history. Once we started out figuring about Ed, we then said we got home, and from Ed we learned about Justin Dart. We learned about Wade Blank. So I headed out on the road and hit Friends of Wade. Did a roundabout tour with about 20 cities with Friends of Wade. Then we did Friends of Justin. And then after about the 100 interviews, it all became Friends of Friends, and saying, okay, we got the national view of what all the people at the top were doing, but how about all those advocates at the bottom in the local school board meetings, showing up at the city council meetings, the local advocate story. How about giving, exploring their antidotes on how did they get things done in their backyard? Because if you're from Washington, you really don't connect with someone doing work down in Atlanta, because it's a completely different socioeconomic environment of how things get done. And that's how we started going in and looking at disability from a perspective of urban, this is how things are done in the city, suburbia, and then rural. And we tried to get 5 or 6 environments from each state. And that's how it's grown to 260 locations, 170 cities. Now we're up to 48 states. And the last tour, which I was supposed to be on right now, was 55 cities, 11 states west of the Rockies, to finish up so we can go into spend the rest of my life publishing 20,000 3 to 4 minute YouTube clips or platform clips. So then then the next generation can take this down and use this information to make their own movies. It's not about making one documentary. It was about supplying content and personal experiences of our local advocates, so then they could do a History Day project and get introduced to community while they're in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, rather than being introduced to community when they're flat broke at 21 and trying to find a house, food, and services. Because so often parents don't even recognize that there is a disability rights community. And so often young people find out about movements when they're in college, if they're lucky enough to be in college. And just the rarity of it being an advocate is probably 1 in 100,000 people to actually go out and become an advocate for disability. So that's kind of like the genesis of the project. And now, and then our idea is to just give internships using the first one. Steve, have you seen Eric's film? It's Just Us?
All right, see what?
Have you seen Eric's History Day film he did in 2006? It's Just Us?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let's start off with that. It's a 10-minute History Day film. It focuses on Ed Roberts, Wade Blank, and Justin Dart, Wade Blank, and Ed Roberts. And this is what he did for a History Day program with the first 25 interviews that he did on his journey home from Harvard Summer School back in 2005. So I'm just going to cut. I'm new to this thing.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I need to put your website in the chat so it doesn't get lost. It's ourstory.com.
Yeah. And then I think I just cut and paste my URL and put it right here, and it'll act like we're sharing a screen. We'll see. Okay. Oh, come on. Come on. View, view, view. View, 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 view. Stand by.
Also, I'm having trouble hearing you. I mean, seeing you. I'm sorry. Seeing you. Could you make yourself be the speaker view?
Don't.
Okay, that's going to be a beyond. I'll try. I'm kind of like this is the first time I've been on Zoom doing this.
Well, I
Oh,
just
I'm sorry.
interview, but
Okay.
then
I'm a boomer.
Can you control your screen in the upper right corner? You can choose speaker view.
I just did that.
It's just us.
But then you see the shared screen. So that's up above now.
Taking the stand.
I'm not sure that's what we want to do.
We're more than handicapped without these laws. We're crippled.
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us.
As countless social movements took to the streets, nearly 500,000 people with disabilities were trapped in institutions, unable to express themselves, unable to protest, unable to live in society. For tens of millions living outside of institutions, the lack of access and social acceptance reinforced the inability to live in the community. People with disabilities were stigmatized with pity and fear. They were considered socially upsetting individuals of less worth. They were them. From this atmosphere, a philosophy of independent living developed, which Lex Frieden described as participating in day-to-day life, making decisions that lead to self-determination. For disabled people, that implies living in the community, away from custodial institutions, responsible for one's own affairs. While America was changing the way it viewed itself, 3 men of different backgrounds took a stand for independent living and disability rights. Ed Roberts, an aspiring baseball star, Wade Blank, a minister from Ohio, and Justin Dart, a wealthy business executive. These men joined an army of disability advocates to change society forever, taking a stand while sitting.
I'm an artichoke.
Ed Roberts, a vibrant boy with contracted polio and paralyzed from the neck down, able to move only one finger. He became what many consider the father of independent living.
Judy Heumann, co-founder, World Institute on Disability.
Doctor had told Ed's mother that she should hope that he would die because he'd never be more than an artichoke.
A high school honor student, Ed attended community college and was accepted to Cal Berkeley. The Department of Rehabilitation rejected his request for tuition assistance to be unemployable. Ed took his first stand while in an iron lung, went to the media, and won the needed assistance.
Steve O'Connell, Ed's personal care assistant.
The reason he became a pioneer was not because he was nice, and not because he was friendly, but because he challenged, and it was in his spirit and it was in his nature to challenge everything, challenge everybody.
Ed was the first Cal student with a severe disability. The only accommodating housing was an unused wing of the Cal Hospital. Other students with disabilities followed Ed's path and together formed the Rolling Quads, an advocacy group which inspired the first independent living center in 1972.
Elmer Bartel.
We can't hear anything. All sound was lost several seconds ago.
I think you have to unmute Scott.
Oh, Jesus. Has anyone had sound?
Graham here is an artichoke.
Yes, you need to back up a little bit
Lise?
Particularly on the outside, but
And can you increase the volume as well?
Which inspired the first
I've got-
independent living center in 1972.
Elmer Bartels.
Could articulate the vision. He was a leader. He was an example, and he was willing to put in the work.
That's all I got on my end.
1975, Governor Jerry
Can you hear
Brown
you?
appointed Ed to director of the Department of Voc Rehab
Yes, some people are having trouble hearing it.
and opened 9 new independent living centers. Ed won an epic battle against the federal government to fund these centers.
Fred Fay, Boston CI.
Zoom.
Really, wherever he's at.
You'll just have to read the captioning.
His genius was like a genius of the heart.
Sue Swenson,
There was
art.
power there. That you just can't, you almost can't talk about.
And it's like, so today I'm here as an artichoke. And it's like, I'm prickly on the outside, but a big high on the inside.
Ed Roberts led the inspirational charge for thousands of advocates to create 400 independent living centers in the United States and co-founded the World Institute on Disability in 1982 that facilitated international reform for countless millions of people in their struggle for human rights.
Three-hour people. John Holland, disability rights attorney.
Wade had come out from Kent State, where he had been shocked, horrified by the killing of the students, and he'd been a minister at Kent State. And to recover, he took a job as an activities director at Heritage House, which was an absurd job in a way, but obviously was prophetic for his life, because he never left that mission.
Babs Johnson, adapt.
First started Atlantis community after working in a nursing home and seeing how people with disabilities are warehoused there and told when to get up and what to do for the day. Wade created Atlantis. It was the first home health agency in the state of Colorado.
As Wade Blank took a stand for accessible public transit in Denver, he was confronted by the disability community's cry of nothing about us without us. Wade not only had to fight the society's inability to adapt, he also had to fight for the support of the greater disability community.
Molly Blake, widow of Wayne Blank.
Yourself, and they don't like him. They don't believe him. He was a enchanted person.
Like Reverend King, Wade involved the poorest of the community and attacked the grossest social institutions that enslaved them. In 1983, he co-founded American Disabled for Accessible Public Transit, ADAPT, which was an organization with the power to fundamentally change these situations through protest and civil disobedience.
Had this real belief in the evolution of justice over time, over history. He really did. He really believed in the triumph of justice.
He was a brilliant, unbelievable theorist. He was a Buddha in theory. He was enlightened. He understood exactly how things would go, to the point that he said had become gold.
Justin Dart once remarked that, "I was never sure in my heart if I was on the right side of the bars, but I knew Wade was."
Lead on, I love you.
In 1967, Justin Dart went to Saigon and visited an institution for children with disabilities, a visit he later recalled as a branding iron burning onto my soul that inspired his stand for the rights of people with disabilities.
Gerald Baptiste, Berkeley CIL.
In a positive way, he was so easy in doing it that people don't realize a lot of these things.
Returning to Texas in 1974, he entered the world of disability rights, where his journey to craft America's last civil rights bill began. By 1985, the principles of an American with Disabilities Act were envisioned through his experience of shaping disability policy for Texas.
And it was all about work, and it was all about empowerment, and it was all about thinking the long term and changing people's attitudes.
Gina McDonald, National Council of Independent Living.
The ADA through Congress. He took of his own time and traveled around America, taking testimony, to take it back to the Congress, to show them the dilemma that people with disabilities are facing across America.
The passage of the ADA incorporated an immense political struggle that directly affected 42 million Americans living with disabilities.
Cindy Jones, Executive Director for Accessible Society.
Whereas Bush would have been yes, he would sign.
Bob Kafka, National Organizer, DAP.
Great mix of the conservative, progressive sort of thing that came together around an issue, which was disability rights.
Justin Dart passed away 12 years later, but his message lives on. It was, as every speech he ever delivered, the words of a fighter, lead on, I love you.
I guess you can say he's the type that can walk in crowds and hold his moral virtue and talk with kings, yet not lose that common touch.
How many roads must a man walk down before?
Lex Frieden, Chair, National Council on Disability.
The confluence of these movements, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the Vote for Women movement, the consumerism movement, people with disabilities, part of these communities, part of America. People come to me and say, God, what you guys did was just great. And I'm not impressed by that. I mean, if it hadn't been me, if it hadn't been Justin, if it hadn't, it would have been somebody else, because it was a natural thing to
So that's what a 17-year-old can do with the content that we collect from our leaders. And that was just from the first 31 interviews that he put all this together and got a, and so when I saw this coming, we put it together. It's like story with how it's made history is a generation makes the history that didn't experience it, and you supply the generation that didn't experience these pre-ADA experiences the content to create modern media. And there's a formula in there that these are all 3-minute stories, and that's the world we live in. We live in a 3-minute world. But 15 years later, and 1,600 local advocates that tell the local stories of how their local institution got deinstitutionalized. You know, you talk to the lawyers, they got them out, then you talk to people that were in the institutions. And we have this rich archive of human experience that, that as Lex Frieden said, can help any movement when it comes to advocacy. Because if we can do it, you can do it. Did I lose Jerry? Or maybe, can anyone hear me? I can't hear anyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. See all these buttons here.
Yes.
Okay, I'm good.
Keep rolling.
Okay. I seem to be just, I'm suffering low bandwidth. All right. Just get back to that. So that was a piece that, for a high school kid. Well, we had an intern that came in on 2010. He was taking one of those those, I don't forget what the year, they take off a year before they do their graduate studies in that. And using the same footage, we wanted to see what his perspective and gave him saying, okay, tell a 3-minute story about the movement. And this is what he came up with, Spencer. Well, actually, after he then went through his internship, went out and got a job for $50 an hour with a film studio company, which I hope the audio shows up here. But this one's on our YouTube channel.
Ed started his presentation by saying, the nice little old man came up to me and said, son, I'd rather be dead than be like you. Ed said, what's the proper response to that? And I said, well, the correct response would be
An age of exclusion.
There was no right to ride on a plane, enter a restaurant or a store.
You may be told you have to leave because people don't want to watch someone drool.
We were living under substandard conditions.
Not going to school, sitting on the ward all day, not being talked to by anyone.
It is still a right to be independent.
Number one precept of independent living got to be that we had to teach ourselves how to fight.
All of a sudden, meeting Ed confirmed that we could change.
You had to be politically active. And I think a lot of us came to that conclusion very quickly.
We have demonstrators in wheelchairs.
Movie about disability rights.
Once the nursing home caught wind of our ideas of independence, things began to get ugly.
You become more disabled in jail.
Disability is allowed. It can be powerful.
Beyond charity.
We love you all. You are our inspiration.
People will want to hand you $1, sometimes hand you 25, hand back the dollar, but 25 maybe you think about it.
Beyond pity.
and you realize that having a disability doesn't make you shrunken or less.
I didn't know that it was okay with me to fall in love with somebody with a disability, but I knew then.
When you're up against something that the world doesn't give a rat's ass about, suicide sometimes comes to mind.
As long as our government funds places that people would rather die than go, it's a great cost containment measure.
I get out of my wheelchair and I start climbing. National news, I had local, I had everybody, they say that it was the image of me was the final decision to get the ADA passed.
It's our story.
It's always a journey. It just always takes a lot longer than you think it should.
Free our voices. www.itsourstory.org.
Okay. Are you hearing the audio on this, on those?
Yes.
Oh, they did come through. Okay.
That one came through better than the last one.
Yeah, it was done by a college student. A little better skills, production skills. And that, but, so I've got over 2,200 hours of stories, and the way these, the video history format, basically you got 90 minutes to go through every interview starts off the same. How did you get introduced into the disability rights movement or independent living or people first if you're part of the DD community in that? And then you do from that point on, you go back to their decades that when they didn't have any involvement in the movement or advocacy or even knowing what it was, what life was like before knowing, and then you transfer in how did this knowledge evolve your awareness of humanity and aid in making your life successful, worthwhile participant of your local community. But my Achilles heel is I live with chronic pain. So if I spend an hour, hour and a half on a keyboard, I'm wrecked for the rest of the day because I had a motorcycle accident in '76 where all my stuff is hidden, but I cracked up 27 bones and surgeries and 3 months in the hospital and 18 months in rehab. So I can go out and collect content and everything, but sitting down and writing a grant is nearly impossible for me. And so I'm my own worst enemy. Is I can raise on the phone, I can raise $5,000, $10,000, hit the road, go out, get the content. But for post-production, I'm totally at the mercy of myself, which is I can do what I can do. I can get the content and get personal stories I like, because I used to be in the film business, so that's why I had all the equipment to do this. I used to do PSAs for nonprofits, and that's how I could afford the initial $200,000 investment in broadcast quality equipment because I already had it, and this became my hobby for humanity, for lack of a better word, because it's always a hobby until you get a wage from it. So this is what I do in my spare time. And I created a website because after getting 1,000 of these interviews, there was one thing I was wondering about our community is the role modeling is so hard for young people. And so I spent about 8 months thinking, well, in America, role modeling is all about getting a gold watch, having a nice house, being able to go out to dinner. And I was trying to say, well, how can we find the role modeling for the new generations coming up? And so, well, it's famous people. And that's where this endeavor came to fruition. Is it working? Oh, it goes with window within window. That's not good. Let me erase that. Let me erase that. Erase that. Where is it? Boom, 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 boom. Famous people. But I designed this with the autism, the kids with on the spectrum, the visual. So I took about 6 months to go through about 1 million photographs online and then reduced them to about 10,000 images of their best, but I was trying to grab the images that use their abilities. If they were covers of books for writers, covers of albums for musicians, what they achieved, and put them in a format, a visual format that has, for instance, putting the success of them in by 27 diagnoses. And this is a fun section for people that's trying to transfer from or just trying to evolve and finding role models. So if you have, for instance, let's go to the lowest one out of the diagnosis, because we have this hierarchy of disability and that, and you know, for instance, and I'm going off task here, epilepsy. I had no idea that in the 50s and 40s, we had epileptic camps throughout America. There was like 12 of them, where if you had epilepsies, you'd actually be institutionalized with other epileptics all the way to like 58 or 59 until I came into the Epilepsy Association, and they tell me these stories of when they were kids in the 40s and 50s, that they'd all be shipped off to these camps and isolated in rural countries and that, until the parents got involved and put a stop to it, say that's enough. Because social workers would just knock on the door and say, you don't have to put up with this, and we can take care of it, and you can go upon your life. And it just horrifying me. And you had one up in Michigan, you know, a rather big one. But schizophrenia, that's the one that scares everybody. So you go into the gallery, come on, help me. And each one has a diagnosis. They can go to the article where that diagnosis came from. Usually it came from Mayo Clinic or NIH. But then you have this whole selection of hot links to people, famous people, that developed, contributed to society at a high level, but all lived their lives with schizophrenia. And so someone has schizophrenia, rather than being always diagnosed with what's wrong with you, the whole idea was saying, okay, what's right with it? What are the benefits, and what was given back to humanity through schizophrenia? And, you know, Jack Kerouac, you know, Nash was a famous one, of course, Beautiful Mind, but Kurt Vonnegut's, you know, and each one of them, Richard Brannigan, I love him, goes boom, goes right to their Wikipedia page, and you can spend 2 days just in this one section of getting comfortable with the idea of succeeding in this world while living with schizophrenia. And out of 27 diagnoses, I made it to 25 of them, and I ran out of energy. And that, so I still have 3 categories left, which is spinal cord, Tourette's, and one other that I need to have a month or two to finish it, because each one of these, this was a year-long process putting this thing together. But then I put them all on Flickr, and you can get a bigger view of their contributions through a visual perspective of this is the content that they left behind and that they inspired and that they produced. Hoofda. The time just flies by here. But as you see, that the people with schizophrenia have been a huge benefit to humanity. If, you know, when allowed and given the resources, the support, and the understanding and the mentorship, which I really believe in. It's that being access to, and each one of these are 3 inches wide by 8.5 inches long. So they were designed to be pulled, so somebody can go and just drag it off and put it in their presentation when they're talking about schizophrenia, and it would be a sidebar on their presentations. And that, in actuality, I wanted, next Interturn that I get digitally thing, I want to do an app where these things scroll along your phone, because they were built for, everything was built for mobile phone now. And so they could stroll and swish, and then when they could press on each one of these images, and it would connect them to their Wikipedia page. So they could, you know, do the touch tone, and you press on that image, and it'll tell a story about that image or the origins of that content. So this is still under development. and that, but it's just one of 27 diagnoses that I trying to break through, as we all are. We're trying to break through that mainstreaminess, the normal, and convince them of the worth, because it's a value system, and I just don't feel that we're valued as air quotes normal people seem to have a valuation in that. And let me see if I get to this. So I've got 10 minutes here. Where do I want to do? So that's a fun little thing that's under development here. And so the categories are pretty easy. It's be inspired. It's anything that's inspirational. This is like Dizabuzz Gallery. It's set up to, well, we'll just, oh, I hate doing that. Excuse me. It opens a different window. I'm not keen on what happened here. Well, anyway, this is basically all content stuff. ADA diaries. This is where Justin Dart traveled around. All the testimonies he did. He did all 50 states. There's 10,000 pages from 42 states that are testimonials from the 80s, before the ADA was passed. I found those in a garage of Jonathan Young. He did a thesis on this back in the 90s, and he was really close to Justin. And then I had the ARC of Washington, D.C. had a print shop, so they made PDFs for us so we could put them up online. But I'm going to get back, since we've got 10 minutes, and show some more work from young people. Here's a 1-minute piece on Judy Heumann. Where is it? Judy Heumann, 1 minute, 14 seconds. And copy. Put it in here. Boom. Courage Center gives out an award every year in Minneapolis. And the recipient, one of our interns was his father worked for the Courage Center. I don't know why that did that. Sorry.
Pat Gordon's on his way.
Oh yeah, right. Why did that do that? Oh, maybe I just tried this one.
The first person in New York City to sue the Board of Education to get a teaching license.
Hey, this is a little 1 minute story.
Credentials because of paralysis of both lower extremities.
A visionary for disability rights.
I was the first person in New York City to sue the Board of Education in order to get a teaching license.
Through her own battles, compassion.
I was the president of Disabled in Action. We were involved in civil disobedience. People were being told to have a disability was a tragedy.
Through compassion, advocacy.
I was a leader in the disability rights movement around the country. We could define our own agendas. We could run our own organizations.
Through advocacy, leadership.
I went on the board of the Berkeley Center for Disability, and we wanted to create an organization which we called it the World Institute on Disability.
The second-class citizenship has stripped us as disabled people of pride and dignity.
International leadership and service.
How could we create a voice which would allow empowerment, dignity, self-respect?
A pioneer for the Rehabilitation Act, IDEA, and the ADA. Join us to celebrate the 2010 recipient of the Medtronic National Courage Award, Judith Heumann.
Oh my goodness, I don't know why I keep doing that. Oops. Okay. So, can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So that little that little 1 minute piece we sent off to them, and they said, well, we want more for their presentation. So they hired us to do something that they could show at their main event on Judy. And we actually flew out to Judy in Washington, D.C. and made, this is operator error, sorry, and made a 10-minute piece.
Judy Heumann has been at the heart of the milestones that have marked the progress
Your
of
screen is
disability
not
of
showing.
America over the past half-century. She has lived a life of innovation, determination.
You need to share your screen again.
And her work has changed what disability means in America.
Can you hear this?
I learned that I could make a difference
Okay.
by speaking up for myself. And
Just
I
can't
learned
see.
that I could make a difference by working with others and having groups of us
Maybe
speak
your
up
own
and help
screen.
ourselves.
She just was able to bring people together, focus attention,
Are
articulate
you sharing a screen?
not only a need, but a way to solve that need. So she
Pardon me?
lists all of the
There's no screen being shared.
Oh my goodness. Stand by. Operator error. Goofball. Screen share. Sorry. Okay, screen share. Oh. All right, I'll start this over. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm old.
Well, I thought you were what you were sharing was yourself, and that you were doing good.
Okay, here it comes. All right.
Oh, no, this we saw. It's the next one.
Judy Heumann has been at the heart of the milestones that have
Can you
marked
see
the
that?
progress of disability rights in America over the past half
Yeah,
century.
you can see that.
He has lived a life
Okay.
of innovation, determination, compassion, and advocacy. And her work has changed what disability means in America.
I learned that I could make a difference by speaking up for myself. And I learned that I could make a difference by working with others and having groups of us speak on behalf of ourselves.
She just was able to bring people together, focus attention, articulate not only a need, but a way to solve that need. And she has all of the characteristics of somebody who can bring about change without burning down the city.
It was such a discovery for me that you could do anything you wanted to, that you felt you wanted, you could achieve if you worked on your part. She taught me that.
Judy was born to Jewish immigrant parents in 1947. At that time, Newark was in the midst of the polio epidemic. At 18 months, she contracted the disease and would be a wheelchair user for the rest of her life.
Once my parents realized the nature of my disability and that it wasn't going away, my mother said, you know, you have to get a good education because you can't depend on anybody else to support you but yourself. When I was 5, she took me to school, but I wasn't allowed to go to school because I was in a wheelchair and the principal wouldn't accept me.
Heumann's parents faced systematic disability discrimination in the school system, but they weren't strangers to discrimination.
They were survivors from the Holocaust, and they never saw their parents again, and never saw those living grandparents when they left who died also in the concentration camps. So I think the issue of strength and the ability to move forward in spite of adversity is something that they survived on, and that was important to me also.
As Judy entered high school, she realized all the more what was being denied to her by society.
I couldn't get on a bus, I couldn't get on a train, I couldn't get in a car, I couldn't go out to a store and use the bathroom, I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't do things that my friends in high school and college were doing, not because, again, I was not capable of doing it, but because the environment around me wasn't accessible. And there was an urgency that people like myself were feeling that we had to make things happen quicker.
Congress passes the most sweeping civil rights bill ever to be written into the law, and thus reaffirms the conception of equality for all men that began with Lincoln and the Civil War 100 years ago.
With the Civil Rights Act of 1964, proponents of social change now had a legal basis to push through the reforms that were so overdue. But laws are just words. It takes committed individuals to see that they are enforced. When she was declared unqualified to teach because she couldn't walk, Judy took the New York Board of Education to court and won. There was Disabled in Action, a group Judy formed to break down more barriers. She led a series of demonstrations following President Nixon's veto of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. When Congress eventually overrode the veto, Judy had emerged as one of the country's leading disabled rights activists.
We needed to be a sophisticated group of disabled individuals and supporters to be able to get effective regulations developed to take a 24-word piece of legislation and really make it work.
It was this attitude that caught the attention of none other than Ed Roberts, one of the Rolling Quads, who was challenging the status quo on the West Coast. He asked her to come to Berkeley.
Well, I was intrigued by Ed, and I thought it could be really fun to be able to work with somebody like him. Because I think we shared a similar vision of what we wanted to have society become and our view of empowerment for disabled individuals.
With Ed Roberts, Judy and others established the nation's first Center for Independent Living.
I think the important parts of the CILs is that they're really empowerment-based. So as disabled people are working within those organizations, they themselves are instructing other disabled individuals by example.
Having fought the school system herself, she identified with children with disabilities who were still being denied a fair and equal education. So in the mid-1970s, she relocated to Washington to work on the development of IDEA, legislation that required free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive setting.
So I guess a lot of what I've always been dealing with is this issue of urgency and the importance of education and how every lost day of a quality education, not just for disabled children, but for all children, puts them at a disadvantage.
By 1977, key provisions of the Rehabilitation Act, namely Section 504, had not been enforced, and the disabled community was impatient and angry. On April 5th, activists staged sit-ins at federal buildings across the country. In San Francisco, it lasted for 28 days. It showed Americans that the disability rights movement was a force to be reckoned with. By 1983, Ronald Reagan was beginning his second term as president, and laws protecting the rights of disabled people were becoming part of the mainstream. Building on their successes, Judy, Ed, along with Joan Leon, were ready for the next step. With Judy's focus on policy, Ed's desire to take the cause global, and Joan's research agenda, the World Institute on Disability was formed.
There was work being done in research, in public policy activities in the area of disability, but basically it wasn't being strongly influenced by the voices of disabled people. So one of the prime purposes of the creation of the World Institute on Disability was to bring the voices and vision of disabled individuals into the public policy arena in the area of disability.
For the next decade, Judy would serve as co-director of WID, encouraging dialogues and conducting training sessions across the nation. Also during that time, she would take part in possibly her greatest achievement, aiding in the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990.
In the past, disability has been a cause for shame. This forced acceptance of second-class citizenship has stripped us as disabled people of pride and dignity. This is not the way we as Americans should have to live our lives.
Like many, I'm an impassioned person, feel a level of urgency, and also have felt increasingly motivated by the successes that we've made. At the same time, very frustrated by the fact that there are still millions of disabled people here in the United States and abroad who are being discriminated against and not being given equal opportunity.
During the past 20 years, Judy has remained at the forefront of disability advocacy, serving in positions for the Clinton administration, the World Bank, and as a special advisor for the State Department.
I'm excited to be a part of the work that the Obama administration and Secretary Clinton are advancing to really allow the U.S. to be an example for other countries around the world to advance the civil and human rights for disabled people.
Sit-ins in San Francisco, demonstrations in Denver, protests in Washington, D.C., in Gallaudet, and before Congress. People marched and organized and testified, and laws changed and minds changed and progress was won.
In 1991, she was leading a training session in Oregon when she first saw Jorge.
I fell in love with the shoulders. When I met him, I saw him from the back and I loved his shoulders. And that's really the truth. That was how it all started. And then, over time, we have, I think, a deep affection for our vision. We have different components in our lives that come together that make it interesting new whole.
Over the past 50 years, the place of people with disabilities in America has changed drastically. And few people have played as much of a role in that change as Judy Heumann.
Judy taught me that if somebody says no, what they really mean is not it. And she's absolutely right. And I have used it and again. And I saw her use it again and again. And she never gave up.
Judy inspires. It takes the time to empower young people with disabilities to be leaders and to take a role in shaping the movement.
She represents kind of lever in society that can see opportunities and take advantage of them.
Judy's changed the way things work. And now, by mentoring and empowering young people, she's paving the way for a new generation to be involved politically.
As one person, we can make a difference, but as a village, we can have a much stronger ability to make more significant reforms. And I think my life really has been about that, not doing things alone, but doing things with other people.
For her service, compassion, leadership, and advocacy, she is the recipient of the 2010 National Courage Award.
Okay, I'm gonna need some help here, Susan. How do I
What are you trying to do?
back to the? How do I get back to the? Oh, here it is. So if I want to, all right, stand by. All right.
I think sometimes it's easier to unshare, get where you want to go, and then share again.
I know. I'm having I'm having a senior moment. Okay, let's get to.
Just relax. None of us are going
It's
anywhere.
all good. We're laid back group.
Oh, that's good.
All right.
Oh,
Something
Harry
in the
McBride.
So that was an example of how a young person can take some content from the archives, do a little 1-minute teaser out to a potential client. He ended up making $12,000.
Wow.
So that's the pathway to employment example of going, it's not only enhances their awareness of where the shoulders that they stand upon, but it also gives them the ability to create a pathway to careers. And he ended up using his portfolio after working 6 months as an intern, which we pay our interns. We don't believe in that free interns thing. We have to raise money, and he was $1,500 a month. But he turned that $1,500 a month income, when they hired him at $32 an hour to start. And he escalated through the ranks and was making within a year $45 an hour. Then they shipped him off to San Francisco to open up a whole new division with 6 people underneath him at $75 an hour. And now he runs a successful animation company in Chicago where he's making $250,000 a year. And the funny thing is, he can't speak a word. He has Tourette's. He can't get 2 words out at once. 3 words and that. But that was our example of it just doesn't only engage and entertain, it creates tomorrow's storytellers. And very proud of Spencer. We're doing that. We had another intern that was a writer. He wrote all the stuff on the webpage. I basically dictate, and then he put everything you see on this website was part of his internship. And now he's working for Disney as a screenwriter, and for television series, and that, and getting paid $40,000 an episode. But all his writing is just what I could dictate out, because I have that chronic pain thing that I can't bang a typewriter. But all this writing, that was his portfolio that produced, along with other writing examples, of course, but it aided to his portfolio for employment. And now this is what the final look of how we envision the archives to do times 2,000, because our goal is to get to 2,020 interviews to this year, but COVID buried us before going into doing what I do. Woofda. And but this is what the final look will be when we go into post-production. That we'll have over 2,000 of these little mini archives of people's lives, where they not only have their little interviews and their clips in 2 or 3 minutes, social media clips there, but on the sidebar, you have her writings, all her articles, her book reviews, her obits, and her NPR videos, her C-SPAN, everything else that she's been, her online portfolio. And plus, we would add, which we haven't added yet, a Flickr account where we call them up and people can put their photographs. And that's so people can go in there and you can search. And this is the big part. Post-production is the big part. But we've asked over 300 questions, depending on what community they're from. And it's all cross disability, that's why the volume of people, why do you need 2,000, is because we have so many silos in our community. And the whole idea was, how do we bring everybody in and with an understanding of each other's values, and so we can work together. As Helen Keller once stated, alone you can do so little, together you can do so much. It's trying to take that glue that brings us together through story, and this is my life. This is all I've done. This is why I do it. And a lot of reasons, this is why I can't do anything else, because, and just one question that we asked about 50 times, and it was saying, at the end of the interview, we asked them, well, now that you've been through 90 minutes, why do you think this project, how do you feel that this project has value or meaning, or why is this project important? And this will be Harriet, who she passed away years ago, but now she lives. She has a good little home that does it, but we'll just see one little clip of, oh, I did it again. I don't know. Oh, that's right. Excuse me. I've got to go over to my cheat sheet. Where is Craig McBride?
He's on our screen.
I know, but when I click it, I can't expand it when I do that way. The only way I can get a full screen.
Variety of the people and the store.
Oop, oop,
It's our story.
oop. There we go.
Harriet McBride Johnson. Presented by the 88 Legacy Project. Why is this project so important? For 29.
I think it's just interesting. For one thing, I mean, one thing that has energized me in the movement are just the variety of the people and the stories and the backgrounds of how people got into it and what they've done. I think just as tales, they're wonderful. And we don't like to use the word inspirational because that's been way cheapened by overuse. But they are inspirational stories of people who have solved their own problems or coped with their own problems and gotten way beyond themselves to make the connections to other people and, you know, literally change the world. It's exciting to think that the world can be changed. And it has been changed by the movement. And I think that that can give heart to people who are working for peace or racial justice, economic justice, that people with very few resources can do a lot. And that's one thing that's different about the movement. We've never been able to turn out 100,000 people for anything, and we never will. We've never had a lot of money. We never will. You know, we have people who have a really hard time getting to the meeting. You know, they can't drive. They have, you know, they're living on SSI. They're stuck somewhere, but yet they manage to contribute to changing the world. And that ought to give heart to all the other people that feel underfunded and under-resourced. And I guess, you know, the other thing is I feel like it really is all one struggle, that the way disability has historically been talked about, it's like, well, we are the virtuous poor. We're the truly needy. We're the ones who deserve the help. To some extent, we have fed into that because it's to our individual advantage. And if we can get past it and say, look, you know, the reason, you know, Harriet Johnson got a law review and pays a law degree and pays taxes is not her courage of determination, but the fact that her mom had contacts to get her into high school. You know, that the resources were there. That raises the possibility, well, what would non-disabled people do if we could get them the resources too? Why not get everybody the resources and see what they can do? Another one of my favorite historical examples, Helen Keller, very, very famous part of disability history. But people miss the point that her father had enough money to bring Annie Sullivan in to stay there 24/7 for years. You know, that it was resources that taught her to spell WATER at the pump. And yeah, it turned out that she was extraordinarily intelligent and had extraordinary gifts, but it was the resources that brought them out. And, you know, what would happen if other people had the resources?
Be inspired, be informed, be involved. We plus you equals power.
There we go. We can forego the marketing. Whoops.
I knew I loved her.
Oh, she's great. And so, like you said, we asked that question to 50 people. Well, we all, since it was at the end of the interview, I could have the intern on. This was a kid that had trouble in high school because he had ADHD and some disciplinary things. So he did a 6-month intern with us, and we had him isolate the 50 clips, which all this sheet of thing I'm going to pass on to Susan so she can share all these links with you. But he created this little thing, and you can see everybody's response to this question. Stephen Brown's off, but here's Stephen, answering that question, and it gives an example of the diversity that one question produces. So our 300 questions that have been asked to 100 times to 100 different people explodes our diversity, so someone could get a really deep understanding of community from a multi-disability perspective. And because just the reactions of, this is Kathy Martinez. She was head of labor, DOL department, very, and she took Judy's job for director of WID, World Institute of Disability. And so you can go in there and look at everyone else's response to that, just that one question as an example from around the country, and how they respond to that one question is, why is our story important, and the power of our story, the value that it has for not only our community, but for the greater community at large that surrounds us. There's Rebecca Hart Gokley. She was advisor to President Obama for 8 years. She got hired in, but this was when she was over at Think Tank, when she was just out of college. She was only like 23 years old in Washington, D.C. before Obama found her. And Becky Ogle, fierce competitor. When I asked her the question, is there a disability community? And she went on a 5-minute tirade on saying why she doesn't think we have a community, because we don't act like a community. We don't move in the force. We don't vote as a force. And she tore up that whole question. And I'm talking to a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for ARC. And one of our questions was, how do you transfer to a policymaker? How do you take disability from putting it in their head and transferring it into their heart? And Paul Marchand would lean into the camera and goes, some people don't have a heart, Scott. But it's that repetition of having the same question answered 75 times from 75 different pinpoints on the map that shows how diverse we all are. And like I said, I'll share this linked list with Susan, and you can dive into that list for yourself. But this is what this intern produced. And he, by the way, got off. He went on the road with us for 3 months and spent in studio for 3 months. And he ended up going and getting a great job in a completely different field. He had so much angst about his bipolar stuff that he was closed in. But he went out, became a carpenter. Union carpenters making $30, $40 an hour. But he's at peace with himself. Before he found the movement, he couldn't find peace because he was stigmatized by what all his professionals were telling him what was right for him. But when he got introduced at a very intimate level with the community, he found personal pride, confidence, and saying, it's my life. And this is what he did with that question, the medley, with that same question from the community was, get in here, get in there, get in there, get in there.
Chicago. Films such as this are so important.
Oops.
One question. Why is this project so important? Vivian Nelson, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
The stories, because that's really all we've got. We've got to hear the stories of how we came to this place. It's the history of disability in this country, not even in this country, but in this state, is horrifying. Horrifying.
Rula Beth Navarra, Los Angeles, California.
Humanity needs for us, people with disability, to teach them how to be human.
Lex Frieden, Houston, Texas.
When another movement will need the lessons we have to teach.
Martha Bristow, Chicago, Illinois.
Films such as this are so important because our story has not gotten in. We want the world to see us as the political force that we are. We want the world to see the power of one.
Barry Rosenberg, Denver, Colorado.
Because I think people miss out on the abilities of people with disabilities.
Laura Hershey, Denver, Colorado.
Disability really is a civil rights issue.
Keith Gaynor, Atlanta, Georgia.
Very important that we understand that this is a continuous struggle. It is still a right to be independent. We did it during slavery. We did it during Reconstruction. We did it during Jim Crow. We can do it.
Sarah Triana, Chicago,
The
Illinois.
greatest leaders in history had disabilities. It's a fundamental part of American history, of international history.
John Johnson, San Diego, California.
People don't know really, and I would argue that a lot of us in the disability community don't understand the impact of what we do. We don't understand the full ramifications of getting an understanding of the narrative story.
Harriet
And
Johnson,
we don't like to
Charleston,
use
South
the
Carolina.
word inspirational because that's been way cheapened by overuse. But they are inspirational stories of people who have solved their own problems or coped with their own problems and gotten way beyond themselves to make the connections to other people and, you know, literally change the world. It's exciting to think that the world can be changed.
Jennifer Laird, Denver, Colorado.
A bunch of statistics that everybody has to learn for sensitivity's sake. We're a lot more than statistics, and we have a lot of talents. I don't want to be normal. I just want my chance to stand out.
Rebecca Hare, Washington, D.C.
And it's still going on. We still have people locked up. We still have kids graduating high school and not getting jobs. We still have kids graduating and staying on Social Security. Why? Because 90% of these kids have never seen somebody successful with a disability. Have never been exposed to somebody successful with a disability.
Molly Blank, Denver, Colorado.
I don't think anybody's telling the stories anymore. So bring the stories back.
Becky Ogle, Washington,
It's kind
D.C.
of like the Michael Richards story, the comedian that was on Seinfeld. And he blurted out these, racial slurs. And I think there's a lot of that in people, not that racial slurs, but towards us, that they suppress and suppress and suppress. But I think that, there's a lot of that needs to be put on the table, Tell me, I want to know. That's why I want to know what the other people, I don't necessarily care what Tom, Dick, or Harry and my community right now is thinking. I want to know what they're thinking about us. Because there's not a dialogue. Yeah, I know we're a pain in the ass sometimes, but
Kelly Goldfuss, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
To do is to make movies. The only thing I can think of to do is to make movies. The only thing I know how to do, write, make movies, try and tell the truth the way I see it, try and tell stories, try and get people involved with me. If I get people involved with me, maybe it'll be less lonely. If I get people involved with me, maybe there'll be other people to play with, Maybe we'll be able to make some big splash.
Okay.
You know, Scott, you're welcome to keep going, but I just thought I would let you know you're already a half hour over.
Yeah, I know. I got a big. I got a big clock here.
Okay. Well, as long as people are
You know?
still here, you're welcome to keep going.
You know, you told me that. It's like it's not much really my voice. It's like the voice of the community that I'd like to share, and I'm just the guy that listens to it.
Scott,
Try to do my best.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
All of this information is on your website, or do you have a separate YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's website and YouTube channel. Let me go back to. Let me try to find my place back home. Okay, let me give you a little direction on the website to get you comfortable with. How do I get back home? How do I get back home? Oh, okay. There we go. All right. All right. We'll go to the cover page of the website. Website can be intimidating because it's got 180 pages and it's got 3,000 links in it, and all content will be found under Be Inspired. And then you got your YouTube channel right off the bat there. That brings you right here, brings some highlight stuff. This is the trailer we saw. This is Judy. We haven't seen this one. This is why this project's so important. These are all the clips that we saw today. This one I'll save. It's a little graphic here. Let me just stay on focus. Okay, so you go to Be Inspired, and this is more video content. We did a course. Oh, and every time I do that, we did a course in the poorest high school in LA. I was the only white person in the whole thing, as you can see. But 80% of them were on poverty, and we did this academy, for instance, and we had to taught them how to make their own films with digital storytelling, and this is the result of all those films. And what we did was we created teams where we had a person that was from gifted education, mainstream education, special education, and then severely disabled education, which across the street, they housed 2,000 kids that were cerebral palsy and just really, for lack of a better word, severely boogered up. And we brought them across, we brought 5 of them across, and we built these 5 teams, and we gave them a prompt. And we did 8 weeks after school program with Very Special Arts, VSA, out of Washington, D.C., gave us a grant. And there's a little process video here. We call it Breaking Boundaries. And we taught them how to make the simplest of digital storytelling, how to tell their own story. And we used the prompts of each team had the prompt, and then they made 2 to 3 minute video stories. You get a lot of fun in here, which shows our point was everybody should be mainstream. Why are we segregating in our educational systems? That was the point. All classrooms, we shouldn't have special education. We should all be in the same classroom. And that was the point that we were making. And this was the outcomes from that point. And this one here is a process video that does that. Actually, that'd be a fun process video. It's 4 minutes long. You guys want to watch that? 4 minutes? I'm not being boring or anything, right? Okay, cool. Oops, let's see. Now I'm going to try to, I don't know why it does that. Why it does not, it confuses me. It's a Zoom thing. Okay, Come on. Oh, I guess this has to load. So this person came over from VSA for a couple days from Washington D.C. and
I think for a lot of people with disabilities, you close doors for yourself before you even get there. And so for a program like this, it's really, I think, the most valuable aspect of it, beyond the films themselves, is the instilling in the students the notion that you can make a film. For a lot of people with disabilities, you close doors for yourself, that's before you even get access. And so for a program like this,
when you see them
really,
get
I think,
spark
the
of
most valuable
knowledge,
aspect of
excitement,
it, beyond the films
excuse me,
themselves,
something's happening.
the instilling in the students the notion that you can make a film, you can tell your story, and people will want to hear
Excuse
that
me,
story
I'm going
because it actually speaks
to try to stop this here.
when you see them get it, that spark of
Shush.
knowledge, that excitement. That
Ah, I'm messing up, guys. Sorry.
There's nothing like it.
Two are playing at once.
Media
I
is a
just-
currency for communication. We're here to give those tools to a new generation.
This wasn't recess, this wasn't finger painting, it was production.
All right. Restart. Sorry about that. Two were playing at once. Operator error.
I think for a lot of people with disabilities, you close doors for yourself before you even get there. And so for a program like this, it's really, I think, the most valuable aspect of it, beyond the films themselves, is the instilling in the students the notion that you can make a film, you can tell your story, and people will want to hear that story because it actually speaks to something universal.
When you see them get it, that spark of knowledge, that excitement that people get when they're creating, there's nothing like it.
Media is a currency for communication. We're here to give those tools to a new generation.
This wasn't recess, this wasn't finger painting, it was production.
GSA has been leading the way for decades, and we approached GSA with the concept, let's teach people with disabilities how to make films.
A project like this is really crucial, especially as a high school student, that you're able to interact with people you wouldn't normally see.
I know we're different, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's like, hey, there's a billion people on the planet. We're bound to be different anyways.
We had 2 people in wheelchairs. We had 1 person on crutches. We had 2 people that had autism. We had 4 people that were developmentally disabled. And we had 1 partially blind. So we had the gamut of what you can be in terms of disabled.
When I play Uno, my friends, I like to make the game fun and exciting by playing around with them.
The ways I make this movie because I want to by your hobby. And the movie called Sense of Humor. If you look at me, you don't know that I have sense of humor.
team leaders were all great at helping their team members access their skills, get the creativity going, working with each other. It also showed they all had different disabilities, whether it be hearing impaired or eyesight or physical. But it just showed that it didn't matter if we all have disabilities, we all have abilities, and we can do anything as long as we're giving the right equipment and the learning process, and there's someone there to help, and we can end up helping each other.
I never personally just worked with people with disabilities before in this capacity. It was challenging for me because filmmaking is a challenging occupation. It's challenging to learn it, it's challenging to engage in it, it's certainly going to be challenging to teach it.
I'm afraid of being in a deserted area by myself. When I say deserted, I'm afraid of being in a busy area when it's completely empty. Sometimes it was like a little bit stressful, like when it was crunch time and we're trying to finish and we're trying to meet our deadlines. Yeah, because especially that because remember the tension you feel when it was everyone trying to finish their film on time. The two twins, it was also great to meet them because obviously they're very similar, but their projects turned out to be very different and both very inspiring about art and fear of being alone.
Together in harmony for me to enjoy. The pictures let me show my weirdness and my quirkiness to the world.
I was just simply amazed at the transformation that took place, not so much even in my own daughter, but within all the participants. Everybody was sharing just joyfully and truthfully, and it was a very, very moving experience.
When these kids came on that last day, and they saw each other's work, and then they saw their own work, and they saw people laughing and crying and clapping and responding to what they had to say, no matter how simple and basic they thought it was. They saw the power of their authentic voice. Telling the truth about yourself is okay.
Really, for me as a teacher, and I've taught a long time, it was challenging, but it can be done. There has to be worked on. But as the first time, I was surprised that we got everything done. And it's a miracle when you got everybody to finish the project in a short period of time.
This is a multi-media, multi-interdisciplinary, hands-on initiative, and it's never been done before. And here, not only do we break ground, we broke boundaries.
Thank you. Yep, you heard me behind the lens as usual. So let's see. Get back to what we were talking about. So yeah, all video content and that is under the Be Inspired. The Be Involved tag, it's all the concepts of pathway to employment, social capital building, it's just what we do, what community capshot. And so Be Informed, and then Be Involved is our internship programs, YouTube, video history trainings. It's stuff that we do and how we do it. And that blog, haven't done a blog yet. We just added it because I guess they're popular. And there's a new concept that we're looking at called Patreon, a subscription service that will be our subscription, so we can start raising funds through membership. And that way it just gives a behind the scenes look at what was done week by week. Is our concept for that. Contact is all the different ways you can contact me, email and everything. And then of course the obligatory donate for all nonprofits. Yeah, I'm a little misty-eyed from that one because that one was 6 works of developing curriculum. They had to be all. It was a very intense program because we had to, since we were placed in a high school, it all had to be with California standards, and we had to bring in a lot of different professionals to have it, but the kids' portfolios are great. These are all 5-minute little 4 or 5 minutes. Some go to 12-minute, but they are the individual projects that the young people did. And another thing that was nice about this program is all the team leaders were college students with disabilities. One was deaf, one had cerebral palsy, one had autism, because we wanted to show that college was possible. Because so often when you're in our schools, they go, oh no, Jimmy, that's Joey's dream. You have to be over here. And we just want to break those boundaries of basically it's BS type of stuff. And the problem was we were supposed to do a phase 2 on this to bring in the It's Our Story project and introduce them to community. But Congress cut the budget for VSA from $14 million a year down to $1.5 million a year. In 2012, they pretty much went from 35 employees down to 6 and just gutted the program. And so the Kennedy Center did that. The board of the Kennedy Center, rather than taking percentages from all their opera, from all their programs, they just took the whole cut and said, oh, people with disabilities, because one of the Shriners who developed VSA died, so they lost their angel from the Kennedy family. It was a sad, sad day for disability when the Kennedy Center didn't want to share the loss with all their departments and just picked on us. Because the second phase.
Scott, this is Laura Frankel. I was the director of VSA Michigan during that time. So you and I can talk.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of support and had to back up and regroup and lost many of the state organizations as a result of that.
Yeah, our contact was Geraldine Simonette, the French lady at VSA, and she was wonderful, but she went on, she got fired with everybody else, and they basically kept the 6 lowest paid employees. Yeah, it was horrible.
If it weren't for Stephanie Litvak still being there, we would have no connection whatsoever. And we are now a Michigan Arts Access because the Kennedy Center was going to charge us $3,000 to $4,000 every year to keep the VSA title.
And see, that's a story that I document. When I find out with VSA, when I sit down with my video histories and we document that story should be sunshine. It was given no press, it was given nothing, but if the parents and if people knew the real story, they would have called up their congresswoman and they would have doubled our income. They would have doubled us, because we have to be so politically active to fight the powers that be, the ableism in upper management.
That's another session. We'll do it at another time.
Oh, I know. Get all the XASA, VSA people from around the country. Because and then we could do a whole session on that one, and hopefully this concept will continue after the 80 days, because I have 1,600 people that could do this, already that I've communicated with from a country. This could become just a daily event, because the concept is building community. And how do you build community? And this is how we are building community. In a very small organization that has no budget. I work off of, usually for me to do what I do, I get $1,000 a month. And I travel around, I camp out, I cut bills, I got a Sprinter van where I sleep in, I cook out, you cook in the garden, cook in the things, but it's a labor of love, and it's something that when I started this, I went to YouTube and I did a search, just disability. And this was in 2005, and they had 67 hits on just the broad term. Now you do disability in YouTube and you have 670,000. And then you do disability rights, you have 67,000. So that's how the world has changed. And and it's amazing that how the internet is shifting perceptions faster than light. But what I see with the internet advocacy, it's armchair warriors. Are they going out to the school boards? Are they going out to the city councils? Are they going out and doing actual civic engagement? I don't see it. You know, is it inspiring them to get it? And that's, but as far as my worry, as far as how the community is growing, how our next generation, they're going to take it over and do things completely differently than we did it because they have better tools. But are the tools going to affect policy making? And are we going to be accepted into the movement of movements? Because, you know, it's
Could you put your email address in the chat?
Yeah, or else you just go to the website and everything's in contact. And my cell phone number's there. Here. But yeah, I'll send, you know, all right here, mailing address, my cell phone, my Skype. There's my email right there. It's our story at gmail.com. And oh boy.
Well, you know, Scott, if I might jump in, Gordon Fuller here.
Hi, Gordon. Glad to see you. I like your picture.
Hey, this seems like a time for a good ask, I would say. And I'd just say that if any one of you were to join this wonderful project, it would increase the number of people participating by 100%.
I know. And Gordon's been our board member at Victor Pineda Foundation and a fellow since we've been together since 2007. I finally met him in Idaho when he was doing one of his cabin in the woods adventure. But Gordon's
we created Disability History Month there. Disability History Month, second state to do it, and Scott was absolutely the star of our show, no question.
I get lucky sometimes. I don't know. I've always, well, when I was in first grade, just went through a tornado where 3 tornadoes converged on one spot, and we were in a mobile home. And the only thing that saved our lives was we rolled 80 feet, and the bunk bed acted as a roll bar, and we came out through the debris. And see, back in those days, there was no, this was 1964. There was no, oh, take the rest of the school year off. It's May 6th, you know, no trauma thing, nothing like that. Within 3 days, I was in a new school, and I pop up in the class, and so happens that like 3 days after I just went through this event, because our new school got leveled. But anyway, the teacher said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so they're going around, oh, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a secretary. I want to be this and this. And it comes to me, and I go, I want to be the Wizard of Oz. And the whole school of strangers just laughed. And it just traumatized me about being honest and open in an open space for decades. To say, I'm never going to tell anyone, I'm never going to tell the public what I want to be. And the only thing the thing about the Wizard of Oz, what I liked was the facade, that everybody thought it was all this big thing. And this is going through a first grader's eyes, you know, it was all the Oz and that. And then to find out that this little intrepid, scared guy is behind the screen. And I really like that guy because he put on the illusion of delusions of grandeur. And then when you find out, it's just this little guy pulling levers and that. And there was just something at that time. And plus being a tornado, my youthful mind connected Dorothy and the red shoes. with the tornado thing. And I'm sure I was just totally traumatized, but then being laughed by 30 strangers. The first time I even got a microphone beyond a conference room. You know, I could do conference rooms and living rooms, no problem. But I had to give a Billy from April. His speaker didn't show up, and I just created this big piece of art, which we haven't even discussed here. It was 12 by 20 foot piece of American flag made out of Native American story sticks, 61 dozen. And each one had the picture of the 540 people that were interviewed at that point on a story stick. And he wanted me to do a keynote and for April conference in front of like 500. I mean, there must have been 500 in a room. I said, okay, what the heck? I said, I've avoided this stage for 47, 50 years. I went on there and just winged it, and that's how I got to Idaho, because Kelly Buckland was in the audience and said, oh, you got to come up and see, you got to come up and see us in Idaho for this event. So that's an origin story about a long way, roundabout way of how Gordon and I became connected and have been connected ever since. But yeah, the ask is, it's searching for a writer, you know, that knows how to do the logic model, because I can get through every part of a grant except when I hit the logic model and they ask me, well, what are your outcomes? I put my hands up in the air. It's never been done before. It's like looking into a crystal ball. What do you mean, what are the outcomes? And the logic model, we had to hire a numbers guy to do our logic model for the VSA grant that we did for the New Media Academy. And he was a mathlete, and he figured out, he knew what they were talking about. But for me, I do what I feel needs to be done. And this is the next big step, is finding a team of writers that they can bounce everything off of, because it's always better with a buddy, you know, rather than putting all the pressure on one.
Interview that's your absolute favorite interview? Is there one that stands out?
Oh no. Oh no, I love too many people. I love the struggle that as us as human beings go through, and just to become known in the community as the mother from hell or the pain in the ass. When you go into the community, you only have 4 weeks to research each community, and you have to find out between 3 to 4 weeks, who's rousting the nest, who's showing up, you know, who's at the table and who's pestering the table. And there's always those first, you know, the first thought, best thought type thing. And there's always those, oh, you got to get this one. Oh, you got to get this one. And listening to that struggle from passivity to aggressiveness, it's a beautiful story arc. Because as kids, we're all kind of like, you know, with a couple of exceptions. I always had the thing, for me, I have a sick sense of humor that I was born with, because when I was like 5 years old, I can remember my mother, single mom, 2 other sisters, but I'd be conversing with my mom, and I would drive her crazy. And I knew I'd be driving her crazy for one simple thing. By just going, what? 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 And I'd be giggling inside, and I'd be seeing her getting agitated, driving. And finally, after 6 months, what? Because I wanted her to extend the conversation, or that. She brought me to a hearing doctor. She thought I was going deaf. and my hearing was fine, and that's when she busted me. She said, "You're fucking with me," you know. And that's been part of my trait. It's when someone says something, whether I agree with them or not, I'll take the opposite devil advocates. And it turns out it's oppositional defiance disorder under the DSM guide. And that it's kind of like you want to know the full story, and the only way you can find out the full story is by creating attention for someone to lose it. Devil's advocate, I guess they talk. And then I finally grew up and matured and go, oh, that's not really nice behavior, Scott. You know, you shouldn't do that. Just because you, and I don't know. But I think the advocates have that same type of thing. They want to, it's a very special breed. It takes a lot of courage to go and be what we have to do, and to do it consistently. And our motto of never give up, you know, it's really true. Because before this project, I always gave myself 1,000-day projects where I would do something for 1,000 days. If it's in the flow, if it puts bread on the plate. And plus you're raising children, so you need bread and plates and that. But I thought I could whip this off in 1,000 days, but I had no idea how under-resourced and underappreciated the disability community is from a funding perspective. So I did another 1,000 days, and then by the third 1,000-day round, I figured, well, I guess this is going to be the last project of my life. It might be a 10,000-day project, so from 47 to 74, this is my 10,000-day artistic interpretation, and I'll do what I can with what I have, where I am, Teddy Roosevelt, and try to achieve a simple dream at that time was 20,000 3 to 4 minute clips, an online video editing machine, instructions on digital storytelling, you know, teach storytellers. Rather than making one movie, you inspire 1,000, 2,000 movies, but you teach storytellers skills so they can go and incorporate it into their life and have fuller, richer lives through story. And something so simple, it was like, simple's not simple, as Einstein says, and how I believe it. It's, well,
Let's
sorry.
see. We're losing people at this point. Why don't we see if anybody who's still hanging out has any questions?
Yeah. Or we just
maybe not.
I've got one.
Hey, Judy.
Hey, this has been great, by the way.
Thanks.
But one of the things I've been saying is that, you know, the film industry is dying because of COVID, because we can't do live, you know, you don't have people who can do things. The other thing is the disability people are not represented in films. You've got the footage, people can put it together and make movies. Is that a viable thing right now that maybe you can actually help solve some of the problem of not having movies being made?
Well, that's the whole idea. It's to create skills, storytelling skills, so you can go market yourself, because that was the example with what I did with Judy Heumann. That 1 minute clip produced a $12,000 windfall for someone that was making $1,500 a month. Took them 6 months to do, or 4 months to do, and he had to hire out, but he got to control a $12,000 budget to make a nice film, you know, and travel and that. And see, my final sessions, when I close out this series, I have the 55 cities from the 11 states west of the Rockies, is I'm ending up in LA in 3 sessions. I'm working with the Writers Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, Directors Guild, and I'm interviewing all the celebrities, because I'm going to come into it with 2,000 interviews. And see, this is my funding strategy, because I'm good at the dinner table. I think that this is going to get funded by saying, I've been doing this for 15 years. They understand what it takes to do production values, because I bring in the lights, backdrop, you know, professional mics, all that stuff. But working with those guilds and the artist community of LA, that they can understand that we're creating future storytellers and future talent, that they're used to going to a Malibu dinner party and writing checks. Because for the cost of a low budget Hollywood film, which is 10 million, we could produce the whole kit and boodle. And the beautiful thing about our post-production strategy is we're going to introduce a new person every day. So that's going to be their day. And so there's over 5 years, it'll be like a click of a clock. And that person, that clip, will introduce a new clip every 15 minutes, like a tick of a second hand. And it'll be that person's day. And we're going to start with all the deceased people first, because we have over 200, and I keep finding out more on who's no longer here, because I was looking for Deidre Davis, because she used to be on the EEOC board, black woman, and then she became an executive for Walmart for the disability part, outreach, and then she had access to Walmart because she lived in Fayetteville for Susan to get some funding, because Walmart has this emergency funding pot for $25,000. They turn around it's a 30-day to 45-day emergency fund that Walmart has. And since she was right there in Fayetteville, I'm going, oh, call up Deidre. Well, the numbers that I gave Susan was, they were all gone. And so then I go, oh, I hate doing this. I go to Google, I do Deidre Davis, disability, obit. And sure enough, she died 3 years ago, you know, and this happened. And so I'm sad the whole day, you know, and that's the water I carry on my back, is these 250 people that haven't been able to see their video histories published. And that, but that's also the motivation that keeps me from not saying, ah, screw it, I'm going to go and just live off my $638 Social Security check and play in my garden, you know. And because I just got retired and always be working for nonprofits, there is a reason. It's low wage. And so my check came to $638, but I'm going to cash in at 62. And so I'm now on my third month of being a recipient of that. But that, there was an emergency fund, but I find out about this all the time going, oh, they're not here. Oh, they're not here. But once I develop their archive, they will be here forever.
Yes.